The glorious summer of 1940 gave the British their first taste of total war. The Battle of Britain wasn't just the RAF's finest hour, it was the people's battle.
Everything was going on overhead and around us, but we just carried on in the ordinary way and did the very ordinary things. I mean, we did the gardening, looked after the animals and cooked the dinner and so on. You know, we made the best of it.
Put your thumbs up and say it's tickety-boo, 'cause tickety-boo means everything will be fine.
In the months leading up to the battle, civilians had learned to tighten their belts. Sugar, butter and bacon were on ration, but much of the nation's food was imported, and the convoys were under attack, so many unrationed foods were also in short supply.
Oranges, bananas, anything like that were absolutely unknown. Nuts, all the things that we imported, which were not necessities, but were in any way luxuries, of course they vanished.
You boiled parsnips. These were called mashed banana sandwiches, and you boiled parsnips and you put banana essence, mixed it with banana essence, and you ate it with bread and butter, and that was your banana sandwiches.
Sometimes the bacon used to taste fishy. Well, we know why that was, because it's to feed the pigs on fish meal.
You were allowed to keep chicken, but only a certain number, and if you had over a certain number of eggs from those chicken, you were supposed to let the Ministry of Food know. Well, yeah, no, within reason.
Because potatoes were all right. We used to get plenty of potatoes. We thought, oh, if we'd only get an egg, we could have an egg and chips. That would make a whole meal.
And now, turning to the Easter holidays, it seems that our cameramen were fascinated by the number of weddings that took place. All records, they say, were broken, even allowing for the popularity of Easter as a marriage date. Men in uniform and men in mufti, they all chose Easter, and at some places they got married at the rate of one couple every 10 minutes. Confetti was used by the ton.
It's amazing, even when places like the Netherlands fell, France, never for 1 minute did we ever doubt that we weren't going to see us on the winning side.
We were young and full of enthusiasm. We were a bit worried, but we were strangely, blithely confident that we could handle things, if you understand me.
There were more than 50,000 people at the Empire Stadium, Wembley, to see the Football League War Cup final, and a nice evening they had for it too.
The British determined to carry on as normal. Only a week after Dunkirk, the unofficial cup final between Blackburn Rovers and West Ham United went ahead. And the newsreels didn't miss the opportunity to make a propaganda point.
It was from a raid on their own goal that West Ham went ahead and proved that defence can be turned into attack. The ball has gone out to Foxall at outside left, who went away with his usual dash. He eludes Whiteside and then passes inside to Goulden. Goulden passes forward to Foreman, who makes straight for goal. His shot's well saved by Barron, but then Small scores.
But in June, the mood began to change. With German forces massing for invasion, the south coast began to clear the decks of anybody who didn't need to be there.
Profiting by experience of German methods on the continent, highways are being protected with roadblocks, and new schemes are being laid for coping with invasion, which we couldn't pass on to you even if we were told about them. Bridges are commanded by obstructions, and strong points have sprung up everywhere. All these signs of military activity are reassuring to the general public as evidence of well-thought-out plans to grapple with the situation.
I remember seeing all the barbed wire going right along the water's edge, and also concrete posts to stop any invasion. And then one evening, these vans came right around the town saying that an invasion was imminent, and people that didn't have essential jobs in Bexhill were advised to leave.
Some of these city boys were evacuated, but the country boys felt it was beneath them. They wouldn't miss anything. And on one occasion, I gave out to a form of 30 boys papers for their parents to sign if they wished the boy to be evacuated. And only one brought his paper back signed, and the others nearly lynched him the next day for being such an utter fool as to miss the fun.
Populations are certainly on the move in this war. From eastern and southeastern counties, evacuated children have now been re-evacuated. Early in the war, they went out of London and other big centres to the seaside. Now they leave the seaside en route for Wales. Luckily, the children take it all with a smile, They apparently think it good fun and thoroughly enjoy these conducted tours of Britain.
We saw my aunts and decided that we would all meet at the station at 9 o'clock that morning. And then coming back, my mother said, of course you do realise that Duke has got to be put to sleep. And that was my little dog. I hadn't given it a thought until then, but of course we were only allowed one suitcase and no animals. And I said, well, I can't take it. She said, neither can I. We were so fond of the dear little thing, you know, it was lovely. And in the end, my mum asked my uncle to take it. He came back with his lead and collar and he said, don't ever ask me to do a job like that again. He had to get in a queue. I suppose there was loads and loads of people having to have their animals put to sleep. It was very sad, really.
Evacuated from London and the south of England, hundreds of dogs have adopted new owners for the duration. It's rather bad luck on the original owners, but that can't be helped.
The Ministry of Information told a rather different story.
Many of the dogs will be given war work to do. They'll be taught by their new masters to help the LDV.
All the children had gone, and so the people who were left were usually very, very young or very, very old.
What was the town like then at that time?
Deserted. Deserted. Rabbits were in the North Down Road, in the main street here, and you could, all the shops were boarded up with thick plank boards over the windows so that you walked through an alley of wood, and most were empty, of course, and the whole place had an air of desertion about it.
It was a time where you were just living from day to day, really. You didn't know how long it was going to last or what was going to happen. I couldn't call it a good time, but we did have fun. We were a very united team at the hospital, and there were so few people left in Folkestone that everyone knew everyone else, and it was a very nice atmosphere.
If a convoy passes through the channel, as they still pass, this happens. Sometimes the convoys are shelled from the other coast with even less success.
Those who stayed behind had a grandstand view of the battle that raged over the Channel and the seaside towns.
And any fine day, this may happen. They call it a balloon strike.
You couldn't believe this was happening, you know. It seemed unreal to think the planes were flying through the town and below the balloons and dropping bombs at the same time. There was one occasion when they got underneath the balloons, you actually see the pilot's face with a scarf flying out, you know, around the back of his neck. Absolutely terrific.
Right on our own doorstep. Oh, what a spread.
The white vapour trails and the howls of the planes crashing and so on. Oh, yes, we used to run out to look. The whole idea was we didn't want to miss anything. We wanted to see what was going on.
This formation came in, and I said, oh, they're ours, you know, and went on knitting, and suddenly looked up and saw the swastikas and said, no, they're not, they're Stukas.
There was this bang, 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 and we thought they were machine gunning us, and we jumped down lay down in the gutters, as we were told at school, to lay in the gutter and put your hands like this at the back of your neck.
I saw the bomb actually leave the aeroplane, and I saw it come swirling down like that, and it passed over the place where I was in the business, and it ended up down the Millmead Road here, but it was actually released well over the sea, so you didn't get much warning.
One down Dower Street, and a warden shouted out, "Get that helmet on!" And as soon as I just put my helmet on, ping, there's a little piece of shrapnel caught the right side of my helmet. Very small, but you just have ping like that. And I suppose that was very lucky, because I was a fool really, because I should have known better. So from there onwards, never outside the house without a helmet on if the air raid message red had gone.
Dover is sticking it by a marvellous communal spirit. Everyone helps. The fire service is strong and efficient. The warden delivers the meat, the fruiterer is a policeman, the news agent runs the first aid, the shop assistant drives an ambulance.
We want large numbers of men between the ages of 17 and 65 to come forward now and offer their service in order to make assurance doubly sure. The name of the new force will be the Local Defence Volunteers.
We were expendable, and with luck, we might cause them a little bit of trouble on the way going down, but there was no doubt about it. There was no force that would come to our rescue or anything like that. Oh, no.
Did you feel that you were standing alone?
Oh, no, we felt very confident. Very confident indeed.
Why?
Well, because we're British, isn't it? And, you know, we've never been invaded yet.
Our shores are well fortified and strongly manned. And behind them, ready to attack the invaders, we have more than 1.5 million men of the Home Guard, who are just as much soldiers of the regular army in status as the Grenadier Guards, and who are determined to fight for every inch of the ground, in every village and in every street.
Well, they were a cross-section of the community, really. There were sort of doctors, lawyers, city gents, a lot of retired generals and admirals, because this is being a retirement area, and the local grocers and butchers, and very much like Dad's army. And just 1 or 2 youngsters who were waiting to get called up.
Poor Colonel Montmorency thought, considering all the wars he'd fought, the Home Guard was his job to do or die. But after days and weeks and years, bravely drying his manly tears, he wrote the following letter to the Minister of Supply. Could you please oblige us with a Bren gun, or failing that, a hand grenade will do?
I went into the little sort of slit trench with the commanding officer, and was given this grenade and pulled out the pin, and with trembling fingers I put my hand back and hit it against the back wall of the trench. The grenade dropped to the ground, and I just stared at it in amazement. Well, the company commander, with great presence of mind, picked it up and hurled it out, and it exploded in mid-air. His comments are unprintable, I have to say.
So if you can't oblige us with the Bren gun, the Home Guard might as well go home.
When a German bomber crashed in the shallows off Margate, 2 very young Home Guards were ready for it.
The searchlight came on and it went out to sea, and it slowly swept right round the bay, and it swept right round the bay. And there, suddenly it picked up the tall tail fin of a Heinkel 111 with a nice big black swastika on it. And as a 17-year-old, I really thought the war had begun.
What happened after that?
They got out on the wing.
Who did?
The Germans. And they stepped foot into the dinghy. And in the searchlight light, they mechanically rowed towards the shore, very, very gingerly indeed. That must have been a very uncomfortable 5 minutes for them. They were waiting for a burst of machine gun fire to finish them off, and that's what they thought they were going to get. But I got up and I went and pulled the dinghy ashore.
Did you say anything?
Yeah, I said, hands are hot, hands up, and we've been taught to say that, part of the training, and get out, you know, and so they got out on the shore. They were immaculately dressed in German officer's uniform. He was, I'll always remember, he was a medium-built young man of about 22, and he asked could he comb his hair, and he had most beautiful hair, and he combed it back, and he was a real German and very proud of it, you know, and very confident, because obviously he'd seen all what was coming from on the French side, and he thought he was here for a couple of weeks and then he would be going home again, you see. But in actual fact, they went to Canada and they were there for the whole duration of the war.
Any old iron? This once familiar street cry has now assumed a new importance as a wartime slogan. If everyone hands over their scrap iron, it's astonishing how much the total collection will be, and it'll go some way towards winning the war. By reclaiming iron from all sorts of useless, worn-out articles, stocks can be considerably increased, as of course they need to be, for the demands for iron will be enormous. Helping in the good work are special bedstead cutter-uppers.
You've got to be misers.
Paper and bones and metal are real treasure to us just now. You will shorten the war if you see we get it all.
In every household, they used to have a bin supplied by the council to put all your, like potato peelings, cabbage leaves, which you didn't use, in there, and they used to come and collect it once a week for the pigs, the old pig swell.
In many parts of the country, we want waste food to keep our pig population up and keep us all fed and fit this winter.
Sausages weren't rationed. Offal wasn't rationed, but you had to get there in time.
Every time you went out and you saw a queue, you didn't know what were you going to get, but you tacked on, hoping you get something. You probably waited for ages, and it was usually sausages, which were a luxury.
Well, it was like bush telegraph, really. So, you know, somebody said, you know, they've got sausages in at Sainsbury's, or they've got meat pie in at Lipton's or something, and then you rushed along. Or...
And you never knew what you were queuing for. I mean, it could have been oranges, it could have been onions, or you could have ended up with a toothbrush.
One of my biggest worries was getting an onion.
There's not very much you can cook without an onion. And then, luckily, I had some American friends, and they would send me a box of dried onions, and I was very much in demand then.
And not being a cook, I don't remember that. Yes, I do remember in the first year. That's right, there was a shortage of onions in the first year, but only in the first year because, of course, we planted plenty in the second year, and so there was an abundance of onions.
Everyone started growing madly. You see, it was all Grow for Britain and the Land Army, and so every little bit of allotment and land was used to grow something on.
Civilians were keen to contribute to the war effort. They responded eagerly when Lord Beaverbrook appealed for old saucepans to turn into Spitfires.
The royal household joins in the response to Lord Beaverbrook's appeal for aluminium, and a woman's voluntary service van arrives at Buckingham Palace to collect pots and pans which are being replaced by other ware in the royal kitchens. As the covers and colanders are thrown on the heap, they're smashed up by crowbar to render them useless for anything but scrap. The attendant in livery brings Mrs. Aitken a toy aluminium kitchen set, a gift from the Princess's doll's house, while the chef in person sacrifices his beloved utensils in the national interest.
The campaign was good for morale, but there was no real shortage of aluminium for Spitfires, even though the factories of Supermarine were working flat out to keep pace with the RAF's losses.
We were terribly busy in those days. We were working from 8 in the morning until 8 at night. We used to have one day off a week if we were lucky.
She was on copper pipes for the Spits, and I was on the tanks, top and bottom tanks.
Perhaps our eyes met, I don't know.
Yeah, I think she kept looking at me, I think that's what I was.
Oh. Most of our courting was done on the benches, tea breaks and things like that, you know.
We had a little band that we got up there near. I was playing the violin. My part of the piece was Apple Blossom Time, you know.
You will be mine in apple blossom time. I'll be with you when in apple blossom time.
It was rationing all the way. Curtain material wasn't on ration. I found some very, very pretty curtain material. I managed to have 3 bridesmaids. Our wedding cake was a plain fruit cake with marzipan on top because icing wasn't allowed, and it had a white cardboard cover with crepe paper interwoven on the top, and it looked quite realistic and very pretty. I remember one of my bridesmaids was very late in coming, and she said, "What a beautiful cake." It never occurred to me to say to her it's artificial, and when we went to cut it, we lifted the top off and she went, "Oh!" She was so surprised.
Hats were the thing, both for men and women. The Minister of Trade at that moment didn't put hats on ration. And that was a great morale booster because women, if they could have a hat, they could get married in it, they could get somebody buried in it, they could go and meet their boyfriend or fiancé or husband and feel really smart, whatever the rest of the clothes were like.
Not all of us have yet been through an air raid, and the stories of those who have are still interesting.
Thanks to the Anderson shelter, we're quite safe. I think he dropped a couple of bombs on us and it shook the Anderson shelter like very ill. But when I heard the four boys talk to me, I was quite contented.
They dug a hole big enough for the size of your family to sit down in, and you took a deck chair, and they had a couple of bunk beds in there. And then they had this corrugated, rather like a 2CV roof, and then they put earth over the top. And more often than not, you were really digging for victory, so you put a few lettuce and cabbages as well.
I remember my 21st birthday, we had 8 air raid warnings, and we were in the shelter 8 times in and out. And I thought, what a birthday.
You'd all pick up your books, your nightdress, and the cat, and your flask of tea, which you always made before bed, and you often filled the bath. You filled the bath because it would act if your house was on fire or there were any incendiaries, you could use it when you got out of the shelter. And you all trooped down and sat down there until the all clear went.
Bom, bom, get in your shelter. Bom, bom, don't helter-skelter. Get yourself right underground when those Nazis fly around.
The lucky people these days are those who possess Anderson steel shelters. Make use of them and don't leave them until you really know it's all clear.
Bombing forged a new bond between the royal family and their subjects. For many people, the King and Queen were slightly remote figures, and it was rumoured that if in danger, they'd seek safety in Canada. They didn't.
While missiles were raining down on London, as they've already rained upon many other of our towns, a time bomb fell only a few feet from the wall of the palace at the back. The King and Queen, who were absent when it exploded, soon returned to the spot and examined the damage, which was fairly heavy.
The Queen said she was glad that the palace had been bombed. She felt she could now look East Enders in the face.
Their Majesties have continued to tour the districts that have suffered most damage in recent raids, and the knowledge that their King and Queen are among them, they were actually caught in a raid and had to take shelter during this particular visit, has greatly heartened the people. Their Majesties were tremendously impressed by their steady courage.
Went to the basement or a shelter if it was very, very close. But otherwise, you sort of stuck it out. You thought, oh, well, if they're going to bomb me, they're going to bomb me. That was one's attitude.
Was it fatalism, do you think, or was it some sort of...
Oh, fatalism, complete fatalism. You thought, if I'm to go, I'm to go. Well, there was no other way of thinking.
The whole thing was so different. You was living in an unreal world. I mean, you lived for today. You didn't think about tomorrow.
This night the door was blown off and the windows were blown in, and my mother was hobbling round saying, I've been wounded, my foot is hurting, it's bleeding. And when we finally got a little light, we discovered that Mother had just got a drawing pin in the sole of her foot.
On one occasion I went to the mortuary to lend a hand. One of the chaps was taking a body in to lend a hand, and I saw my uncle on the slab, who I didn't even know he was dead.
In the hospital I was working at St George's, I had a big hall. And of course we took all the casualties from the West End, most of them. And we had a cat. We called him Midnight Joe, because he was always out at night. And he was midnight black. But if we always knew when we were going to have casualties brought in, because Midnight Joe would sit himself on the side of that hall and wait for the ambulances. And to me, he was a sort of sinister announcement of heavy air raids, and Midnight Joe signified for me a busy night in the theatres and in the mortuaries.
The start of the Blitz in September marked the end of Spitfire summer. Now, Londoners would discover what the people of the South already knew, that the brutal realities of bombing could be endured. Britain had survived the first shock. Now, there was a war to win.
It was a sum of extraordinary excitement, comradeship, pulling together, sadness, a lot of sadness. You know, to think that one minute people could be here and the next minute they're gone. There was a lot of sadness, and also a lot of joy and comradeship.
Put your thumbs up and say it's tickety-boo, 'cause tickety-boo means everything will be fine. You'll always wear a smile if you'll only say it's tickety-boo, tickety-boo, tickety-boo today. Put your thumbs up and say it's tickety-boo. We're going to show the world who's who. And this is how you end your little chorus. Thumbs up, tickety-boo, tickety-boo.
Let war-scarred Dover have the last word. Well, Mrs. McEwen, are you leaving Dover?
What? For that rat Hitler? No fear. If they want us to go, they've got to throw us out. But still, you're wasting my time. I've got my dinner to cook.